Positioning, the difference between carrying a game and watching it from board. If you ever wondered why you keep getting deleted, well, this video might be for you. But before we go into details for every single ship class that we have about positioning, let's actually define what makes position good. Good position means that you achieve the balance between effectively using key aspects of your ship, such as main armament, your consumables, your durability, and stealth. First, let's go over the stealthy torpedo boats. And just by that sentence, you should know what you're gonna be using the most. You're gonna focus on using your concealment, the stealth, and torpedoes. Torpedoes are most effective when fired from the side of the enemy, while your stealth gives you huge advantage on open waters, not close to the islands, and not on the objectives. But silent, technically, if I go to the objective and I outspot an enemy, it should be my advantage, right? Well, yes, but actually no. When you go into the objective, you're basically signifying that there is a ship there, meaning you're probably gonna get radared and killed. If instead you go on the side of the objective, first spot the enemies, make sure there is no radars in there, you outspot the enemy DDs, help your allies deal with them, then you can go into the objective. You need to avoid being the first target enemy sees. You need to stay alive till the late game, when you're the most effective at dealing with big enemy ships. What you should not ever do is rush into the cap in the first couple minutes of the game. And remember, if an ally tells you, "Shima, why didn't you cap?" and the guy is not named like Maltese Knight, or Trenlas, or Flambas, or any of the actually good players in this game, you should probably ignore him. Stealth DDs, such as torpedo boats, shouldn't also gunfight unless absolutely necessary. You're not a Rambo, okay? Retreating is always a better option. Now let's go over for the gunboats. Those select teams suggest focus around the guns, and usually do not really have such great concealment as torpedo boats. Their job is to apply pressure, force enemy DDs to make mistakes or run away, and harass the rest. The key aspect of positioning with those is to always have an escape plan. Regardless if you play Harugumo and want to farm from the smoke screen, or you play something like Kleber and prefer doing it on open water, you always want to have an emergency way out of the situation so that you can re-engage in more favorable time. For smoke farming DDs, it's usually an island or a line of your allies, where you can retreat behind so that enemy DDs that are more healthy than you can fall into the trap. Just like with torpedo boats, you don't really want to go into the cap circle, however, in contrast to them, you really want to be near it, just so that whenever enemy destroyers makes a mistake and thinks it's safe to take a cap, goes into it, you can engage onto it and kill it very fast, especially when you have a radar cruiser nearby. Which brings me to another point: do not engage solo. You're great at joint forces with your allies. Another thing that you shouldn't really do is sit in one spot for too long. You're not a stationary turret mounted on an immovable object, you're very agile turret mounted on the object. You're a shark, you need to keep moving to stay alive. If you stay still in your smoke screen, you're gonna get torped. If you're gonna stay in one place as a gunboat, well, you're probably gonna get flanked, and it's probably gonna be Venezia. The last and third type of destroyers are the hybrids. Those have both advantages of torpedo boats with their really decent torpedoes and pretty good stealth, and gunboats, meaning that they can actually win some duels with torpedo boats and be a fair match to gunboats. However, they're not focused entirely on one thing. Their job is kinda both. They spot, contest caps, torp, and harass if necessary. Those give you the most flexibility, but they're not really exceed at specific stuff. So you can reactively position yourself based on enemy threats. I suggest you should start just like torpedo boats, by spotting as many enemies as possible, and then depending on if you can actually get them down or not, continue playing it just like torpedo boats, or go a little bit gunboaty style. What you want to do, however, is not to try to do everything at once. Even though you're very flexible, you want to focus at one task at a time. If you want to take an objective, do not farm on open water when doing so. If you want to be a stealthy ninja and eliminate enemy with your torpedoes, also you shouldn't smoke and start farming them with guns right after it. You can do many tasks in one game, but at the same time do not do more than one, okay? Just like DDs, cruisers also have three main types. First is the most common one, the kiting cruisers. Job of a kiting cruiser is to stay at range, deal consistent damage, and survive. What you want to do is start on a flank, and you don't really want to overcommit to it. I highly suggest you should check your DD's concealment and move behind it in such a way that the distance between you and your DD is the difference between your DD's concealment and your cruiser's concealment. So that if the DD gets spotted, you get spotted with it and can engage onto the enemy together. The moment that happens, you already kinda want to be turned broadside to the enemy. If you're detected broadside, technically it should mean your death, right? Well, no, because if the moment of your detection is when you're broadsiding and you're that far away, it gives you just enough time to turn outwards, not towards the enemy, outwards of the enemy, and get the correct angle before enemy shells will reach you. You need to start turning the moment you get detected, not after you see the shells coming towards you. You want to use your speed and changes of it to dodge the enemy shells while moving away from them. But that doesn't mean that you want to run towards the edge of the map. You want to run for just couple squares. The moment you're gonna have problems with hitting because of either lack of range or enemy being too far away, you want to use your concealment to reposition yourself and basically redo the same thing. This strategy applies to both the torpedo-focused kiting cruisers and the gun-focused kiting cruisers. If you're playing a cruiser that has a possibility of dropping smokescreen, you want to not only use the kiting strategy, but also the same thing I've told about when talking about the smoke farming gunboats. You want to make sure that your smoke screen is not gonna make you bloom, and it's not gonna be the place when you're just gonna be sitting, because if you're just gonna be sitting there for quite significant amount of time, you're probably gonna be torped and killed fairly easy. Second type of cruisers are the island huggers. Your job is gonna be to control key areas, deny enemy pushes, and support your Ds. What you want to do is find an island near a cap or a choke point and hold it for your life. You want to make sure that your citadel is hidden behind an island when enemy can shoot at you, because you, for example, spotted by enemy radar or planes. But you also want to position yourself in such a way near that island so that you're not detected when you're firing and there are no planes or radar. You can do that by sticking up your front turrets without sticking the highest point of your ship, because this is how the detection works in the game. It's based on the highest point of your ship. Then you want to use your radar, hydro, and very high DPM that cruisers have to dominate the fights. What not to do is, if the island doesn't fully cover you, you're just sitting there waiting for a battleship to notice and blab you. Such for example this Brisbane, who thought that if the island is gonna cover him from those couple destroyers and he's near the cap, this is a good position. Well, no. Last are the big cruisers, almost battleship-like cruisers, such as Petrol, Moskva, Stalingrad, Puerto Rico or Alaska. Your job is to support your team with a radar, durability and denial of area. No DD wants to get close to you, especially when you have a radar ready up. You want to position yourself in such a way that all the enemies are either in front of you or a little bit towards your side, but you don't want to have on both of your sides, you want to have them exclusively on one. And you can do it by either using an island or a map border. You want to use the map border to reduce one side of the enemies if you spawn on the flank, but if you spawn in the middle, you want to find yourself a big island to sit near it. You don't really want to stay stealthy, you want enemies to shoot you. But if things get a little bit too hot, you can always reverse back, go dark, heal back up and do it again. Being semi-near objectives is relatively good, but you don't want to push in early. Going alone in isn't tanking for your team, it's just basically a suicide. Wasting radar when your team cannot shoot means that enemy has a free window when they can take a cap or get to your side and kill you. You're tanky, but you're not that tanky. Now let's go over the battleships, the biggest, tankiest and slowest ships in the game. But just because you have huge amounts of HP and armor, that doesn't mean that you should take every single fight head on. Unless you're playing Ushakov. Then you probably can even get combat scout like a DD. First type of BBs are gonna be the Sniper BBs such as Yamato, Vermont or Slava. Your job is gonna be to deal high damage salvos, punish enemy broadside and provide crossfire. You want to stay at medium to long range from the enemy, but do not go too far back. The fact that you're a sniper battleship doesn't mean that you want to sit on H line or A line if you're on the other side of the map. If you spawn on the flank, you want to go as much to the side as you can, so that enemies that are angling towards you are vulnerable to the ones that are sitting in the middle. If you sit in the middle, you want to be a little bit further back than the guys on the flank, but that doesn't mean that you want to be near your aircraft carrier, just slightly further from the enemy than your allies on the flank, because if you are further than your allies on the flank, well, that makes you being crossfired instead of providing it. While sniping from the spawn might feel relatively safe, you're not doing much for the team when you're there as a sniping battleship. You don't want to be the last ship alive, so especially later in the game, you want to move closer. You can even make some pushes. It's not that the sniping battleships are bad at brawling, it's the fact that you don't want to do it in the first couple minutes. Next we have the Brawling BBs, and those fall into two categories. We have the gun-focused one and the secondary focused one. The gun-focused one is gonna be the Kremlin or Ushakov. What you want to do is you want to push key flanks, key areas. You want to soak up the damage and force enemy to fight you back. You want to be on relatively short distances, since your guns are very much not effective at longer ranges, or simply do not have those ranges. You want to use islands and terrain to just close the distance safely and then go in. But you shouldn't really do it alone. You want to do it with the help of your allies. So communication there is gonna be a very key part. Just signal, hey, do you want to push? Yes, no. If your team is not willing to commit on push, you can stay defensive up close, using that island just like island hugging cruiser to sit safely and get some damage. If you prefer secondary based battleships, the key to positioning with those actually lies in port. When you want to play your secondary based battleship such as GK, first what you need to do is select a different ship and actually play it. Secondary based battleships are very much not favored in today's meta, but you can still play them. You want to position yourself in those on the flank, just like you did with the big cruisers, so that enemies are on one side of you and in front of you, but not towards both sides. And then you want to steadily push, just like in this replay. I managed to caught enemy Shimakaze off guard because he was trying to force being on the side of me, and I got a hydro, so I killed him. And then I used the map border to ensure that there's not gonna be any enemy on that side, and continued pushing into those 3 battleships. And if those 2 bozos from my team that stacked up in their sniping BBs would do anything to help me, I would have probably lived that engagement as well. But regardless, the outcome was very positive for my team and for me since I got the first place. Just like with destroyers, we also have hybrid kind of battleships here, but I'm not talking about the ones that have extra tumor on their back with planes. I'm talking about the ones that can brawl and can snipe, such as, for example, Christopher Colombo. Those ships allow you to adapt to the situation and either play aggressively and push, or snipe. I highly suggest when playing those you want to start behind your cruisers, but not too far, and try to get some crossfire shots on the enemy. The longer the game is, the closer you should get to the enemy. You don't want to rush too early, but you don't want to be the one that at the end of the match is the furthest back. Those battleships are usually faster than the other kind, allowing you to reposition yourself between the flanks or between middle and the flank much more flexibly than any other. Plan ahead your movements and always be unpredictable to the random enemy cruiser that just picked out of an island. Now let's talk about the second most controversial class in the game, aircraft carriers. Yes, positioning matters for CVs as well. Carriers are the most map-aware class in the game, well, or at least they should be. Your positioning affects how quickly you can launch planes, spot enemies, and survive. Where you want to be is near the center back of your allies' main line. The main line being the line that kinda differentiates throughout the game and is basically an invisible barrier between your team and the enemy. You want to move your CV with your team so that you have the most of them between your enemies and you, and so that you can actually reach the fight much faster. You also want to keep a keen eye on any possible holes enemy DDs might get to you. But there are a couple things you should never do as an aircraft carrier player. First, you shouldn't reverse or go to A1 and sit there the whole game. By doing that, you're basically playing on the super hard mode for what people call the easiest class in the game, by making you go for insanely long time before you can actually reach the fight, giving enemy much higher influence over the game. Second thing is moving near the islands, especially at the start of the game and on higher tiers. Whilst hiding behind the island as an aircraft carrier kinda works on tier 4, on tier 10 it's usually very much death sentence. Every single time you move your aircraft carrier towards an island on the flank, you're basically gambling if your team is gonna be intelligent enough to win the flank. Because if they lose, you're automatically dead with them. If you didn't move at the start of the game and they lost the flank, you can always reposition. Once you're behind island, it's borderline impossible for you to change the position as a CV. On higher tiers, it's also a very bad idea move your aircraft carrier at all in the first couple minutes. And why so? Well, on tier 10, most aircraft carriers have more than enough deck armor to be immune to all the battleship shots if they are bow in. If you start turning trying to go behind certain islands or just go further backwards, well, that gives a perfect invitation for all the sniping battleships to shoot at your broadside. And they don't even have to death strike you with that. All they have to do is damage you enough so that your CV is on such HP that the enemy carrier can just finish you off in like one drop. And they will do it. If you really feel so insecure at the start of the match, it's just better to press S and reverse than make a 180 turn. And the last part is gonna be about what I think is the most controversial and the easiest class in the game, the submarines. Submarines are basically torpedo boats, but you can go dark on demand, and you have torpedoes that can aim for you. So what you want to do is basically either get behind enemies by just going under the water and popping up on the other side, or you want to sit near your allies, far away from enemy SFW, but just enough so that your torpedoes can reach the enemy. And most of the time those are gonna be the homing torpedoes. Go to the side of the enemy or try to pick ones that are near the choke points or islands and they cannot really maneuver, and then simply death strike them with torpedoes. You don't even need to use the non-homing ones. You can use the homing ones and still death strike them anyway. So you're most likely safe to roam most of the map. All you actually need to take into consideration is enemy submarine and some ships like Zao, Cerberus, Yodo or Venezia that have this little bit of consumable that can spot you underwater. The only thing I'm gonna ask you is, please don't play them. They shouldn't be in this game, man. Okay, to quickly recap the video, DDs, you want to spot, cap smartly, and don't YOLO. For cruisers, you want to support your team, don't overextend and angle well. For BBs, you want to tank smartly using your armor, create crossfires and push at the right time with your allies, never alone. For CVs, reposition when you need, don't camp in the corner, and don't move at the very start of the game. And for subs, well, please don't play them, but you can pretty much do whatever you want. I want to mention that this is a general guide video that is just telling you many generalized things for the class, because inside the class there are many ships that can vary in a huge or small way. For more detailed information, I highly suggest you go into my guides for specific ships that I'm making. In those, you're gonna find much more ship-specific info. But in the end, it all comes down to what enemy team does, how many potatoes are in each team, and your personal experience in the game. If you like this video and you want to see more, consider liking, commenting and subscribing to the channel. If you want me to cover a specific topic, comment section is yours. If you have questions, I would love to answer them in your comments, or maybe make a specific video for that topic if it's good enough. It's been Senpai Silent, and see you next time.